Well, shalom, everybody. Let me begin by saying that it is a privilege, joy, and honor that Yeshua the Messiah has given me to be able to be here with you once again this year at Revive 2022, because without his permission, I would not be here. So I'd also like to thank HRN, all the staff, all the volunteers that help make this possible, because it's a lot of work to be able to put on this event. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming year by year and participating in the conference. So this year, the Lord's put upon my heart to share with you a message that I've entitled, Is Matthew 24 a Parallel of Revelation chapter 6? So many of you are aware that Matthew 24 is commonly called the Olivet Discourse. And so if we look at Matthew chapter 24 and verse 3, it reads, And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming and of the end of the world, as it says in the King James? Some versions say the end of the age. So as we would read this in English, you get the perception of when's the world going to blow up and cease to exist and not be anymore. But only when you have a Torah Hebraic understanding can you truly even understand the question and what is being asked. So, do you know what the question is being asked when it says, and of the end of the world, or of the end of the age? What is it that the disciples would be interested in knowing? What would the Torah world be interested in knowing? What would the Jewish people be interested in knowing? You want to know the answer? When is the end of the exile? Because from the time that the northern kingdom went into captivity by the Assyrians, and then the southern kingdom went into captivity by the Babylonians, the Torah said that if you would break my covenant, I'm going to scatter you in the nations. And then it's outlined in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 1 through 6, that when you're scattered in the nations, and if you would repent, that I'm going to bring you back from the nations where you've been scattered. Now, if you study the prophecies, the end of the exile is synonymous and associated with the dawn of the Messianic era and the dawn of the coming of the Messiah. And so fundamentally what they wanted to know was, how long do we have to wait until the end of the exile? How long will it be until the Messianic era? How long will it be till you, Messiah, are going to come and rule and set up your kingdom? And probably most people that read that verse, what I just said is not going to come into their mind. So when I was 16 years of age, I was in Sunday school class. And there was a moment there when it came upon me a consuming thought. So when this happens, it's so clear that you can't miss it happening. And so that was the first time in my life I had the thought of that I would live to see Messiah's second coming in my lifetime. That was the thought. And that I wanted to know and understand what the Bible had to say about his second coming. And so at the time that thought came to me, I didn't know anything about Messiah's second coming, because pretty much it wasn't taught in the denomination that I was going to at that time. And so ironically, this happened in Sunday school class, and the Sunday school teacher, when they asked, okay, do you have any questions about life or the Bible that you would like for us to answer before we do our normal quarterly study? And so my question was that, about the second coming of the Messiah. So the Sunday school teacher said, well, that's a little bit over my head, so I'm afraid I can't tackle that, but we'll try to help you anyhow. So the next week, the pastor's wife came in, and she did a teaching on Matthew chapter 24. And went over Matthew 24 and the various signs. So that was my introduction to beginning to study and understand about Bible prophecy. So that was over 40 years ago. And my thirst still exists. The fire is still there for 40 years. And so in the last 40 years, anytime I came across anybody that mentioned anything about Bible prophecy, I wanted to hear about it. I wanted to know about their perspectives. So that being the case, I've become familiar with all types of perspectives and all types of reasons and the Bible explanations for this, that, and the other. So initially, the path that the Lord took me in is that I learned Bible prophecy from what I'm going to label and title now an evangelical Christian view, which is based upon dispensationalism, age of law, age of grace, and then as they explain it, they say the age of grace is the church age and the church is the bride, and then we have a pre-tribulation rapture, then 7 years of tribulation. Messiah comes after the 7 years, sits his foot down on the Mount of Olives, and there we have 1,000 years. So that's initially what I had learned, and that's what most people in the church have learned in the last 30 years or so. That is what's been taught to them. And because that's what I learned, that's what I taught, and they showed me the scriptures and the reason for that particular paradigm, I accepted it as being so, and I felt satisfied that I had learned it. However, things slowly began to change when I was introduced to the festivals. And so when I was 25 years of age, 1989, I heard for the very first time that Messiah died on Passover. He was in the ground the next day on unleavened bread. He resurrected 3 days later on the Feast of First Fruits, and that the Holy Spirit was outpoured on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. That the major events of his first coming, his death, burial, resurrection, and the outpouring of the Holy Spirit happened on biblical feast days. I thought, wow, how can this be so? I've been going to church since I was 5. Now I'm 25. And how come I've never heard that? And then I started to learn how the biblical festivals were prophetic. I never heard about that. That the spring festivals teach about his first coming, the fall festivals teach about his second coming, and now later on in the years, I've now learned that things are in a cycle, that actually the spring festivals teach about his second coming as well. Because the thing that we call the Greater Exodus, the gathering, uniting of the exiles of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, the 2 sticks becoming one, in Ezekiel chapter 37, beginning in verse 15, that the beginning of the Greater Exodus is in the spring with Passover. So Passover is and has a prophetic application about the second coming as well. And so it was, maybe over 10 years ago, I was speaking at a Shavuot conference in Colorado. And one of the speakers that was speaking there along with me shared this idea that Matthew 24 was a parallel of Revelation 6. Well, I was interested in Bible prophecy. I listened to it. But I was so focused on other things and understanding other things that I wasn't ready to take in and try to reconcile and figure out that, what I would call then, that level of detail. And so it was this winter, in January, February, I was just sitting there on the couch thinking about things, and all of a sudden it came to me. I said, I remember that thought, that teaching that was presented over 10 years ago, and I said, wonder if that'll make sense to me now. And so I opened up my Bible and went through Matthew 24 and went through Revelation 6, and I said, oh my goodness, it fits. I can see it. It's like, how come after all these years, that particular thing in my mind became clear to me at this moment? Well, the Lord has his timing on everything, and I think the reason why he caused it to be clear in my mind now is because he wanted me to share it. Doesn't that make sense? And so redemption is a process. And so him teaching you is a process, because we grow from faith to faith, from glory to glory. We go from being a babe and we grow in spiritual maturity. So that's why still 40 years later, I'm still learning. And we're going to be learning for eternity. Our learning is not going to end. Then I was thinking, as Mike Clayton was sharing earlier, that there's been several revives where he has shared before me. And then when I reflect upon what he shared, I said, oh, that's interesting, because that's sort of like thematically related to what I want to share about. And so, his message, if you listen to it, very good message, is this about preparation or destination. And he said, well, we haven't come to camp and stay and not progress and not go forward, that the Lord has us in preparation. So the way God wired me is I'm always asking why about something. I'm always asking what's the purpose of something. And so I reflect and I analyze. So this movement has been going on for over 20 years. So I'm sitting back and going, well, what happened in the 1990s, the late 1990s? What's happened in the last 20 years? We've had HRN for, this is our 11th year of HRN. So what was being done then? What's being done now? So upon reflection, I believe, as Mike shared, the Lord has had us in preparation. And he has not wanted us to make a religion out of any particular thing, because ultimately we tend to want to camp and make a religion, make a denomination about whatever we're being focused on at the moment. So the way I would look at the history of things is, you see, by going to traditional Sunday church, we're always told that we're Gentile Christians. And when they use the term Gentile Christians, we have a disconnect from being a part of the covenants that are in the Hebrew Scriptures. However, it says in Galatians chapter 3, verse 29, that if you are Messiahs, if you believe that Yeshua is the Messiah, then are you Abraham's seed, and you are an heir according to the promise. So in other words, we have a connection to the covenant that was made with Abraham. And then it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, beginning in verse 1, I would not have you be ignorant, brethren, how that all of our fathers were under the cloud, they all passed through the sea. They were all immersed into Moses in the cloud and the sea. So who's he primarily talking to? A non-Jewish audience. And so what's he saying to this non-Jewish audience? Don't be ignorant that what? All of our fathers were under the cloud. They all passed through the sea. In other words, I have a connection to the covenants that were made in the Torah and in the Hebrew Scriptures, in Messiah, and I'm not to be ignorant of. So there is an awareness that through covenant, we are a part of the promises that was made to Israel, because we're grafted in. And grafted in means we're a part of something. And so there is an awareness that we are a part of Israel through covenant, through the Messiah. And then learning and being aware of that, then we came to awareness that the Sabbath and the festivals and the dietary laws weren't done away with. That's part of expressing faith in Messiah. And that in realizing we need to keep the Sabbath and the festivals, and then, well, what about Christmas and Easter? Then we were taught and shown that what we've been doing the last 1700 years in Christianity is mixture. And in Revelation chapter 18, it says, come out of Babylon. Come out of her, my people, unless you partake of her plague. So what does it mean to come out of Babylon? Well, the word in Hebrew is Babel, comes from Balal, and it means to mix. So coming out of Babylon is coming out of mixture. And so we were taught all about how we've been in mixture. And so we're learning all that. We get all excited about the Torah, and then of course, like, how do we do it? And so, well, if we're keeping Sabbath, we're following Torah, well, we got to study each of the Torah portions. But in all of this, as Mike brought out and stated in his message, we need to keep everything centered on the Messiah. We can't forget about the Messiah. And so he has us in preparation and not what? Not, when he said destination, it's like camping at one particular thing and think, okay, I've arrived here now. And so some has made Torah the thing and forgot about the Messiah. And in making Torah the thing, they've even disconnected from the New Testament, and not realizing. And from Psalm chapter 40, it says about Yeshua, in the volume of the book it is written of him. So this book's all about Yeshua from Genesis to Revelation. So what is this about? Even Revive. Okay, the first few years, you know what the emphasis was in Revive? Teaching. I mean, we had, 5 breakout sessions everywhere, and you just got bombarded, teaching. Okay, so what's being emphasized here the last few years? Love, let's get along in community. Okay, so what is the Lord showing us through time? Okay, we first needed to know that we were Israel. We were part of the covenant. We needed to know we was in mixture. We needed to know that we need to keep the Sabbath, the festivals, and the dietary laws. But then we couldn't get along because we fought over our knowledge that they were leading. And the Lord says, no, wait a second. Y'all got to get along, and you all got to be community. But we shouldn't make none of those things in and of by itself the thing, which is what Mike was trying to point out, that if you step back and reflect upon what the Lord is doing, this whole process from making us aware that we're Israel in covenant relationship with Messiah and we're part of the covenant promises, he's been taking us through a process of preparation the whole time. Preparation for what? Preparation for his second coming. Because his second coming is about the gathering and uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel. I don't know about you, but given the fact that I started going to church when I was 5 years of age, and I pretty much went every Sunday. You can count on these 2 fingers how many times I missed from the time I was 5 to the time I was 18. And so to me, going to church was very, very important, and then I couldn't get enough. And so then I tried to hear and understand the Bible, and radio and tapes and television and reading books and all this. But I don't know about you, but from all those resources that are there trying to tell us the meaning of Messiah and why he died on the tree and everything, I never heard that Messiah is coming at his second coming to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. Never heard it. And actually, the way the Lord made me aware of it, it was 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, in the summer of 2000, the Lord said, I needed to study and learn and know what the Jewish people believed. Now, he didn't tell me any more than that. I didn't know what I was going to find out. But in reading the various sources and stuff, that's when I learned that Judaism, meaning Orthodox Judaism, they're expecting a Messiah who's coming to end the exile and to set up his kingdom and rule and reign. That fundamentally, King Messiah, he is King Messiah because he ends the exile and gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel. And so I thought to myself, well, I believe that Yeshua is Messiah. I mean, I don't question that. To me, that's secure, absolutely secure and anchored in me that I know that he's the Messiah. But if that is true, that he gathers and unites the 12 tribes of Israel, it should be in the New Testament. But I've never heard anyone mention about it. And then all of a sudden it came to me in John chapter 10, actually in John chapter 9, when the Pharisees asked Yeshua, are we blind? Part of the answer he gave was John chapter 10, verses 16 and 17. He says, other sheep I have, not of this fold, them I must bring. And then he says, there will be one fold and one shepherd. Well, one fold and one shepherd is the gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. And he said he's going to be that shepherd and that king over them. But he says he has another sheepfold that's not who he's talking to. That's the Pharisees. That's Judah. That's the Jewish people. He has two different sheepfolds and he's going to make them one. And then he adds that, therefore does my Father love me because I laid down my life. So he's saying that he's laying down his life to take two sheepfolds and to make them one. And if we have any understanding of our Bible, the two sheepfolds that make them one is Northern Kingdom, Southern Kingdom, gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. And Christianity likes to preach the gospel. Everyone's going to hear the gospel. And how do they like to define the gospel? I loved Mike Clayton's different elements of what the gospel is. I think he did a beautiful job on that. But how does Christianity primarily define the gospel? Telling the world why Yeshua had to shed his blood on the cross. Okay, that's the case. I agree with that. I mean, that is part of that good news that we need to tell the world. I don't have any problem with that, except for they didn't tell me that he died to take two sheepfolds and to make them one. So they've missed telling the world an element why he died on the tree. And so in John chapter 11, verses 49 to 52, it says Caiaphas, it says in verse 49, it says Caiaphas, being high priest the same year, said, you know nothing at all, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the nation, the whole nation perish not. And this he spake not of himself, but being high priest, he prophesied that Yeshua would die for that nation. Okay, so Caiaphas is prophesying that he's dying for a particular nation. Then the next verse says, and not for that nation only. So he's dying for that nation, but not that nation only. So how many nations? That's two. And who are these two nations? That he should gather together in one the children of God scattered abroad. So now we're told in John 11 that Yeshua is dying for two nations. Who are the children of God? Who are scattered abroad? And who's going to become one? But I never heard anybody in Christianity since the time I was 5 years of age ever say Messiah died on the tree to take two nations who are the children of God who are scattered abroad and make them one. And yet we're supposed to be telling the world the gospel and telling them why he died on the tree. And so that's why he raises up an end-time restoration movement. And you know the song, These Are the Days of Elijah? Well, he's trying to make us aware of song, if we don't get it in other ways, that these really are the days of Elijah. And the days of Elijah are the days of restoration. It's a return to the Torah. It's identifying that you're Israel. And you know what part of the judgment of the northern kingdom was? For breaking the covenant and for through Jeroboam doing mixture? Hosea chapter 2 verse 11 says, I will cause all her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moon, her Sabbath, her solemn feasts. So the prophecy is because of the northern kingdom worshiped the God of Israel in mixture, he was going to scatter them. The Assyrians came and took them away, and a part of their punishment, he was going to remove from them their Sabbath and the feasts and the new moon. Okay, but if it was removed, it's going to be restored. So who's going to restore it? It's the ministry of Elijah in the end of days. And so we've been in a restoration movement. God's been doing this restoring for the last 20 years. And we get drawn to it, and somehow either we love the Jewish people, we love the land of Israel, we love Jerusalem, we love the Hebrew language. We love the blowing of the shofar. It's something that God uses to prick our hearts, to awaken us that we need to walk in this direction. So our heart is being moved, but our head doesn't understand what we're doing, and we have to go through this process so our head can catch up with all the excitements in our heart that we don't know what we're excited about. So then, we hear a particular thing and we want to camp there. And it's like, it's all about that. No, he has this in preparation for his second coming. And so we also cannot spend every Shabbat talking about the greater Exodus, the greater Exodus, the greater. We got to live our lives. Okay, so the Torah was given so we can learn how to live a biblical lifestyle. So now we're living a biblical lifestyle while at the same time we're living our lives, living a biblical lifestyle, learning how to live according to Torah, learning how to love one another, learning how to keep his commandments. We are also preparing for his second coming at the same time. So we can keep balanced. We live our lives. And we live a biblical lifestyle, and we can teach it to our children, but at the same time, we are still preparing for his return, and we are a bride that's made ourselves ready. So here's the irony of the plan and the ways of God. That at the first coming of Messiah, Judaism, the Jews were quote unquote set up to miss his first coming. But now realizing that Messiah is coming for the purpose of gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel, at his second coming, Christianity is quote unquote set up to miss his coming. And it's Judaism that's quote unquote set up to see Yeshua's second coming. And it's Christianity that thinks they know who Yeshua is, and they know Yeshua and trying to tell the world who he is. They're set up to miss his second coming because they don't know that he's coming to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. So God has raised up this restoration movement. It's the spirit of Elijah, of which understanding our Hebraic roots, of which Hebraic Roots Network is a part of that restoration, part of trying to make us aware of preparation. And when the children of Israel was in the wilderness, not only did they learn the commandments of God, but they had to learn how to get along with each other. They had to learn to live in a community. And we're not ready for his second coming. We're not ready for his greater exodus if we're going to fight with one another, if we can't get along. And we're not ready for his second coming if we don't know how to live in community. So God is shifting. He's not taken away from us recognizing that we're Israel. He's not taken away from explaining to us we need to keep the Torah. He's not taken away that, the teach and share that we've been in mixture, that we need to keep the Sabbath and the festivals, the new moon. But there's this another truth that we need in all of that. We need to love one another, and we need to live in community. And that's what he's using HRN the last few years to emphasize this year and elsewhere. But seeing that, I want to share with you and cause you to think, why is he doing that? It's preparation for his second coming that has an application for everyday life. Okay, so now we go to Matthew chapter 24, verse 3. It says, what is the sign of your coming and of the end of the world, as the King James says. So now, if I was never taught that he's coming to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel, I'm never going to read that verse and think that the disciples are asking, when's the end of the exile? And when are you going to set up your kingdom? But that's really what's being asked. So then, to get to his answer. So actually, if you examine how he answered the question, I'm going to read the verse again and emphasize something else about the verse. It says, tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming? How many signs are they asking for? They're only asking for one. Okay? Now, given that if you pay attention to what you're reading, they're only asking for one sign, how did he answer the question? And we got the rest of Matthew chapter 24, and actually goes into Matthew 25, how he's answering the question. And what's he doing in Matthew 24? He's telling us to look for this, look for that, look for this, look for this, look for that. So actually the way he answered the question is he gave us many signs of the sign. And we've been so caught up with the many signs and studying and looking for the many signs that we've missed for looking for the sign. And so in Matthew chapter 24, verse 30, it says, then shall appear the sign. You see, now he's finally got to answering the question. Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man. And it says, then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. Then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven. He's coming in the clouds with power and great glory. So if you don't have a Torah Hebraic background, if you don't realize that they're asking him when's the end of the exile, and if you just read this for face value, you know what comes to your mind? He's coming in the clouds up there, and he's coming to set his feet down, as we're told in Zechariah 14, on the Mount of Olives. And that will happen. But we miss the Hebraic element of it. You see, he's coming in great glory. Well, we think great glory. Oh, he's who he is. Oh, he is who he is. And that really will be glorious. Okay? However, if we understand that biblical history is prophecy, and the reason why we study the Torah is because the Torah itself is prophetic. That which happens to the forefathers is a prophecy of what happened to their descendants. Okay? And so now, if we go to Exodus in chapter 24, we're going to read what the glory of the Lord is. But before we do that, if we go to Exodus chapter 13, verse 21, this is how the children of Israel journeyed in the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire by night to give them light to go by day the night. They were led by the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. And so now I'm going to show you what the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night is called in Exodus chapter 24 and verses 15 through 17. It says, Moses went up unto the mount, and a cloud covered the mount. A cloud covered the mount. And the glory of the Lord abode upon Mount Sinai. A cloud covered the mount, and the glory of the Lord abode upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. Verse 17, and the sight of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire. Okay, so the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night is called the glory of the Lord. How many cloud by days and pillar of fire by nights led the children of Israel in the wilderness? 1. So that's why it's called the glory of the Lord. 1. But what's the sign of his coming? He's coming in great glory. 1 cloud by day and pillar of fire by night, the glory. And so the greater Exodus is such that it's so miraculous that the prophecy is in Jeremiah chapter 16. The prophecy is in Jeremiah chapter 16, beginning in verse 14. It says, therefore the days come, says the Lord, it will no more be said, the Lord lives that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. When is it said the Lord lives that brought the children of Israel out of Egypt? Every Passover. We remember the children of Israel coming out of Egypt. It'll be said, that won't be said anymore. But it will be said, the Lord lives that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north and from all the lands where he's driven them. And I will bring them again to the land I gave their fathers. So Passover in the kingdom, we're not going to talk about what happened with the children of Israel came out of Egypt. You know why? It's just too small. But we're going to talk about how he brought his people from all the nations. And he brought them back to the land of Israel. Now, when he brought them out of Egypt, one cloud by day and pillar of fire by night. We're not going to talk about that. That's just too small. It's just one. But we're told in Isaiah, in chapter 4 and verse 5, it says, the Lord will create upon every dwelling place of Mount Zion. How many dwelling places? How many is every? More than one. Okay? Every dwelling place of Mount Zion and upon her assemblies. How many? More than one. Now, what is on every dwelling place and what is on all her assemblies, plural? A cloud and a smoke by day and the shining of a flaming fire by night. The cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. So, how many cloud by days and pillar of fire by night? On every assembly. On every dwelling place. And what's the collective name of every assembly and every dwelling place? What's the collective name given to it in this verse? Mount Zion. And it says, for upon all the glory, why? Because the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night's the glory. For upon all the glory shall be, the King James says a defense, but the Hebrew says a huppah. Now, what do you do with the huppah? You get married underneath the huppah. So the gathering uniting the 12 tribes of Israel is likened to a wedding, a huppah. So the wedding is Messiah gathering, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. So after the wedding is a wedding supper. The wedding supper is in Revelation chapter 19. When? After you gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel. After the days of the tribulation. Now you have a wedding celebration. The wedding celebration is when you return from the marriage supper, when he sits his feet down on the Mount of Olives. And it says those at the marriage supper are coming back with him in Revelation 19 when he sits his feet down on the Mount of Olives. And he's going to set up his kingdom and he's going to rule and reign. And so, you know how wonderful that is? I don't know about you, but the older I get especially, the more I'm looking forward to Messiah returning and setting up his kingdom and living with him for 1,000 years. Because the world in this generation, the world itself is not going to blow up. It's not going to end. We got at least 1,000 more years. Okay, and I'd rather live the 1,000 years with him than in America, as Mark said last night, Pastor Mark. America is getting so crazy and crazy. If you'd have told me 15 years ago this would be America, I wouldn't have believed you. Okay, so this world's getting more crazier and makes me want to see Messiah's coming. So that's what's being asked. When's the end of the exile? And he told the sign. So if we go to Luke's version, in Luke in chapter 21, and in Luke's version, in verse 28, Yeshua said, when you see these things begin to come to pass, look up, lift up your heads, for your redemption draws nigh. If I ask any Orthodox Jew, what is redemption? What is the redemption? That quick, they know. It's Messiah coming together and unite the 12 tribes of Israel to end the exile and set up his kingdom. That's what the redemption is. We had a redemption from Egypt, but we have a redemption from exile. But if you ask a Christian redemption, it's the completion of our salvation. And I'm going up to be with him, spending eternity with him. There is no thought about that word is connected with the gather, uniting the 12 tribes of Israel. So the sign of his coming is linked with your redemption. Your redemption is, I'm going to end your exile. What is exile? It's living outside of the land of Israel. That's what exile is. So living in America, I'm living in exile. So Messiah was asked, when's the end of your exile? He said, well, the sign of me coming is I'm going to come in multiple cloud by days and pillar of fire by nights. And that's your redemption. That's the end of your exile. That's when I come and set up my kingdom. That's when I live with you. That's when I teach the Torah from Jerusalem from all nations. Isaiah chapter 2. verses 2 and 3. That's what the disciples were looking for. That's what we should be looking for. But we, in Christianity, the last 1,700 years, we've been in mixed worship that brought about when the Roman Empire took Christianity upon as its state religion. And they didn't go back and say, well, we're going to do exactly what the Bible says. They had to take the people that was involved in all kinds of religions and paganism, and they had to orient them to Christianity. So they just took the pagan things or the mixed things and Christianized them. And we've inherited that, and we call that the faith because we've done it for so long. We think it's the faith. And so we need the days of restoration. We need the days of Elijah. And that's why God's raised up this movement. That's why he's raised up HRN to help spread this message, because you're not hearing it in Jerusalem. In other words, you're not hearing it in the mainstream religious system. You're not going to hear it in Christianity. You have to go out to the wilderness to hear it. You know, John the Baptist was a prophecy of the voice crying in the wilderness, and he was of the spirit and the power of Elijah. So it's all about, looking for his second coming. So now if you take Matthew chapter 24 and compare it to Revelation chapter 6, as also was pointed out, I believe Mike pointed it out, after he was asked the question, what's the first thing he emphasizes? The first thing he emphasizes is, do not be deceived. Verse 4, take heed that no man deceive you. Okay, if I make the parallel construct, that's going to be associated with the white horse of Revelation chapter 6. Okay, deception is going to be associated with the white horse. And then he goes on to say in Matthew chapter 24, you're going to hear wars and rumors of wars. Well, what's the next thing in Revelation 6? It's the red horse. And what does the red horse do? It takes peace from the earth. It's war. We might think of it as World War III. Okay? And then he says, see that you not be troubled. And so he says in verse 7, nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There'll be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes, and divert famines and pestilence. What? The black horse. The black horse is famine, and you got the pale horse, which is all the things mixed together of famine, pestilence, war, and all the calamity that comes from all these things happening. Okay. Now, what was the judgment that God brought upon his people in the Hebrew scriptures? Famine, pestilence, war. It's the same things as the judgments in Revelation 6. All right, so then, in Matthew 24, verse 8, he says, these things are the beginning of sorrows. The word sorrows in Greek is odin, it's birth pains. These are the beginning of birth pains. Birth pains of what? What is being birthed? What are we preparing for? What are we ascending to? Where's he taking us? Where's he taking us? Jerusalem. I think it took me longer than 14 minutes to get there, so you have to apologize. He's taking us to Jerusalem. He's taking us, alternatively, Jerusalem is called Zion. And so there's a principle in the Bible that the end of the exile and the coming of the Messiah, that there's a transition from the time of exile to his coming. That transition is likened to a woman giving birth. And what is being birthed is the end of the exile, King Messiah ruling and reigning. And spiritually, the end of the exile, him setting up his kingdom, teaching the Torah to all nations. Spiritually, that's called Jerusalem. That's called Zion. And so he takes us back to the land of Israel. He takes us back to Jerusalem. So now notice, if we make the parallel construct, the white horse is going to be don't be deceived. And then you got the red horse, the black horse, the pale horse is in Revelation 24, 6 and 7. Wars and rumors of wars. And then you have famine, pestilence. They threw earthquakes in there in diverse places. And the next verse says, that's only the beginning of the birth. In other words, the birth hasn't come yet. The end of the exile hasn't come yet. The greater exodus hasn't come yet. In other words, the four horses of the apocalypse come before we start the greater exodus. And then it says in verse 9, Matthew 24, verse 9, then they will deliver you up to be afflicted, and they will kill you, and you'll be hated of all nations for my name's sake. What's that? That's the fifth seal. That's persecution. That's persecution of the believers. And then he goes on in Matthew chapter 24, verse 29, and the translation says immediately after the tribulation of those days. I'll give you a little bit of homework assignment here. Look up in the Greek what the word after is and see every place where it appears in the New Testament. It's most often translated as alongside or at the same time. And so translated after is actually an interpretation rather than a translation. So really what this is saying, if you look up the Greek word behind that, is alongside or at the same time of the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give her light, the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. You know what that is? That's the sixth seal. So Matthew 24:29 is mentioning the sixth seal. And in mentioning the sixth seal, then in verse 30, then shall appear the sign of the coming of the Son of Man. And that is him coming to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel in the greater Exodus. So first, the Messiah is coming in clouds. That's the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. And then, after he gathers us back to the land, that's the wedding. And then we get resurrection. We get resurrected, commonly called the rapture. It's at the end of the tribulation. To go to the marriage supper. And then from the marriage supper, those at the marriage supper return with him, and they're returning in the clouds. So first he comes in the clouds, the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. Then he comes in the clouds, as you commonly understand, in the sky, from the sky, and he sets his feet down upon the Mount of Olives. So notice Yeshua is connecting the sign, him coming in the clouds, that's gathering us by the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, which means we're going to be together, and we have to learn how to get along. We have to learn how to be a community, so we got to practice now. Okay, so we're going to be together, and he's associating it with the sixth seal. Now, if you study the sixth seal, go to Revelation chapter 6, and beginning in verse 12, there was a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth of hair. The moon became blood, and the stars of heaven fell under the earth, even as a fig tree casts her untimely figs where she is shaken. And the heavens departed as a scroll when it's rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, hid themselves in the dens of the rock from the judgment of the Lamb. Now, if you cross-reference those verses from the sixth seal, it goes back to Isaiah 13. It goes back to Joel chapter 2. And after the sixth seal, the last verse of Revelation 6, Revelation 6:17 says, the great day of his wrath has come, and who shall abide? The great day of his wrath. That is the day of the Lord. So the first six seals happen before the start of the day of the Lord. And as soon as we have the announcement of the day of the Lord, Revelation chapter 6, verse 17, then we have Revelation 7. We have the sealing of the 144,000. And once we're told about the sealing of the 144,000, there's a question that's asked in Revelation chapter 7 in verses 13 and 14. One of the elders answered and said, who are these that are arrayed in white robes, and where they come from? He said, sir, you know, they came out of great tribulation. So now we're talking about the people that came out of great tribulation, okay? So in telling us about the people that came out of great tribulation, which is after the first six seals, so they're coming out of great tribulation during a period of time called the day of the Lord. And so who are these that came out of great tribulation? We're being told who they are in verses 16 and 17. Verses 16 and 17. It says they will hunger no more, neither thirst no more. Neither shall the sun light upon them, nor any heat. For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne will feed them, and he shall lead them unto living fountains of waters, and God will wipe away all tears from their eyes. These are the ones, that's the description of those that came out of great tribulation. So Revelation chapter 7, verses 16 and 17, which I just read, is a quote of Isaiah chapter 49 and verse 10. So Isaiah 49 verse 10 says, they will not hunger nor thirst, neither shall the heat nor sun smite them. For he that has mercy upon them, which in Revelation 7 is the Lamb, he will lead them, even by springs of water shall he guide them. So who are these people in Isaiah chapter 49 verse 10? They're the prisoners in Isaiah 49:9 that's told to leave the prison. The prison is the exile. And so Revelation 7, 16 and 17 is describing those in great tribulation that's coming out of the exile, and the Lamb is leading them. How is he leading them? By the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. And he's leading them by springs of water. So if you look at the Torah, what's the obligation of the man in a marriage? He's to provide and he's to take care of. So Yeshua's going to follow his own Torah. He's going to protect and take care of his bride. He's going to feed her. He's going to clothe her. And so he's obligated to take care of his bride. He's obligated to take care of it. You don't have to worry about being taken care of. He's going to do it. You know what you have to worry about? Being obedient. You know what the children of Israel had to worry about in the wilderness? Being obedient. They were taken care of for 40 years. But humanly, we think we got to worry about being taken care of. Don't need to worry about being taken care of. If you're obedient to know that he's coming to gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel, see the signs, and prepare yourself, and then go on the greater exodus when the Passover happens, it starts the Great Tribulation. That's when the greater exodus is. After the Passover, that starts the Great Tribulation. And so you're obedient, you keep Passover, you go out in the wilderness, you don't have to worry about what the world's going to do to you. He'll take care of you. Now you got to be obedient. That means you got to get along with one another. Yes. You got to learn how to live in community. That's going to be your challenge. That's going to be your problem. So you got to prepare. So that's why we're emphasizing here in Revive, get along, be nice. Quit fighting with one another and learn how to live in community, because you're preparing for the coming of the Messiah while you're learning how to do what you should be doing every day anyhow, which is love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? So, I got 2 minutes to describe Revelation 6:2. Okay, I got to verbalize it. Revelation 6:2 is the white horse. So the first, that parallels let no man deceive you. So there's a crown on the head. So in Latin, the Latin word for crown is corona. We're called the coronavirus. Okay? And so then he has a crown and he has a bow. The Greek word for bow is what we get the English word toxic or toxin. And now if you look at the Hebrew word for bow, and the root of the Hebrew word for bow, it means to lay a snare, to lay a trap. So fundamentally, if you look up the Greek and the Hebrew associated with the white horse, it's talking about something that's harmful to you and that's being given to you in deception. And so if you go and ask the 1/3 of Americans, because 2/3 of Americans have got the COVID shot. So if you ask the 1/3 of Americans why they haven't got the COVID shot yet, here's fundamentally the reason why. They believe the system is somehow being deceptive to them. And they don't want to partake of the deception, right? Isn't it about the concern about deception? Well, that's what Yeshua said. Don't be deceived. Now the white horse is about deception. Now, if you look the first place in the Bible where the word white occurs, or a derivative of white in Hebrew is Laban, it's in Genesis chapter 11, verse 3, with the building of the Tower of Babel, where they built bricks instead of stone. And the word bricks there is the Hebrew word for white. Okay, so white is associated with rebelling against God and doing your own thing. And so what's the system doing? It's rebelling against God, and they want to do their own thing. And so now they got to deceive you to follow them. And those that are not following God and keeping his commandments are the ones that are more likely to be deceived. Okay, so I'm throwing out to you the following thought. That Matthew 24 is a parallel of Revelation 6. And the white horse quite possibly could be COVID and getting the COVID shot. If that is true, then the next is the red horse. And we would have just started the red horse, because what would be the red horse if that is the white horse? Well, it's the situation with Ukraine and Russia. And now Nancy Pelosi's trying to stir the Chinese to get mad about the situation with Taiwan. And there's been rumors, they've been telling us, at some point in time, China's going to attack Taiwan. So what do we associate communism with? Red. So we got red China, we got red Russia. And so perhaps we've just started the red horse, and now we're concerned about inflation and the price of gas. Well, those are the seeds of the black horse. Once we got war and we got supply problems and all this other thing. So it's possible that the reason why the Lord made it clear to me in the winter that Matthew 24 is a parallel to Revelation 6, which I've just shared with you, because he wanted it to be shared now, because this is the time to share it with all the stuff that's going on, and people want to know what's going on and what it means and what they should do. But if you know Messiah, if you follow his Torah, the world's going to be afraid. Men's heart will fear for the things coming upon the earth. But he says to you, don't be afraid. Be at peace. Because he's already told you what's going to happen. He's going to take care of you as long as you're obedient. And you know how much he loves you? He spent the last 20 years preparing you. And he's preparing you through the things that we're sharing here in Revive 2022. So I pray that this message has been an encouragement and an inspiration to you. Remember, look up, lift up when you see these things going on, because your redemption draweth nigh. And Messiah is coming for his bride, and he's been longing for so long to come and to dwell with his bride, and that's you and I. And so that's what we have to look forward to, because he's looking forward to coming and get us, and we should be looking forward to his return and be expectant with great joy. So I pray the message has been a blessing to you. Have a great rest of Revive. Shalom.